Okay, welcome everyone to this, our third session of our summer series, Leading in Extraordinary Times, sponsored by the International Institute for Knowledge and Innovation. And our title of this session is Hindsight to Foresight, Value-Driven Strategic Planning. And our featured speaker is Dr. Annie Green. And Annie is the director of not only this session, of this series, but also of all education programs and partnerships for IIKI. And she's well known as a digital thought leader, knowledge strategist, and architect. She was the editor of the volumes that are in the university as we were accumulating a large body of knowledge about this. And so she was the editor of those volumes. And then she's also always lecturing, speaking, reviewing journals. She's a committee member on the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine's investigative studies. So you can read about her, all her wonderful accomplishments. I don't want to, I don't want to take any away from her time. Last week, Dr. Steve Hausman set the table by talking about, and we have 6 phases of 6 types of leadership, 6 styles of leadership that we're going through in this series. And the first one we led off, Dr. Steve Hausman led off with science-based leadership. And he indeed set the table by showing us the concerns that we're facing environmentally and strategically. But it's science-based, and the importance that he brought through of having what we are having our planning and our leadership based not on emotion as it often is, but grounded in science. So given that, the next logical step, which we're talking about here, is strategic foresight driven leadership. And that's different from predictive or trying to predict the future. We're saying foresight is a specialty when it comes to leadership. And as Andy says, as her tagline for this session is, origin provides context and perspective, ab initio, start from the beginning. That which is new comes from that which is old. So it makes great sense that now that Steve set the table for us and told us the challenges that we're definitely facing going forward, now we need that foresight and leadership to do the necessary strategic planning. And I'll give you a little hint, because Annie, in addition to her many talents, she's also, her specialty is the digital enterprise and the role of AI in that digital enterprise and in planning and orchestrating all of that. So with that, Annie, we'll turn it over to you. Take it away for Hindsight to Foresight, Value-Driven Strategic Planning.
Okay, thank you. Let me bring up my slides. I need to take them to the top. Sorry about that. I should have been prepared with it. Okay, I'm going to minimize you all so that I don't see you at that point. Okay. I'm going to introduce some things, and I'm going to bring forth some thoughts that we've been having throughout the years. One of the things is we have to look and see where we've been to know where we're going. And a lot of times in our organizations, that doesn't seem to be the case today when we look at the studies. So what I'm going to talk about is basically the goal of knowledge, what we started out with, and then intangibles. And we're going to look at the current status as to what's driving this. And my emphasis here is on strategy development. And it also incorporates the AI of it. I'm going to change some narratives in here, things that we've been looking at for a few years that I'm going to kind of put it in a different perspective to actually align with what we're the direction that we need to be going in order to improve our organizations, the performance of them. And I'm going to talk about some value sources and then the cognitive enterprise system and then give a conclusion. I think sometimes we forget from the beginning the goal has always been to gain knowledge, which is an intangible asset. And that goal is to be able to know or see the things that we cannot see that are actually adding to the performance of our organizations. So we need to look at those things of intangible assets, which most people will say it's fine to have it under an umbrella, but most people say innovation, or they say relationships, or they say expertise, but we never look at it that they're all lumped under this one title of intangible assets. And a lot of times I see where people use intellectual capital all the time, and capital is not necessarily an asset because it's volatile. So you have to capture it. Knowledge is the same way. If someone's walking around and they have their knowledge in their head and they leave a particular spot, then therefore it is volatile and it has left. So it is not an asset. And we have to start to learn how to capture our assets, especially the intangible ones, which is usually captured in our explicit knowledge and not necessarily our tacit knowledge. So we need to know what we need to know. And looking at studies like MuleSoft, this is 2018, and I haven't seen a more current one lately. I've been watching, but I have to be honest, I haven't seen this change over the years, because even when I did my study to look at what are these areas, most of them came back the same. So our executives are saying, you know what, we need to see how IT is operating. So we need operational efficiency here. And most of them say we need to know the customer experience. That's of value to us. Business efficiency, which is part of our operations, which is our business processes. We also need to see what products and services are doing in the marketplace. Employees, we need to understand the employees and how they actually fit into our performance. And then we have this partner experience. And that's really grown, because in a lot of cases, you have augmentation staff from other companies, as well as vendors, as well as other types of institutions that feed into your value system of your organization. So that gives you, with IT, for some reason, always coming at the top, but that gives you 6 areas. And you're going to see later that in my studies, I've identified a couple more that add value to an organization. Now, the challenges that our digital organizations are facing right now, IT is no longer the gatekeeper to technology resources. They're distributed throughout the organization, so we've lost control of it. This supports the critical need to know how data, technology, processes, and people are connected, because we don't see those connections and we don't have visibility into them. As with McKinsey, it says, 70% of executives' time is spent making decisions under pressure with too little or the wrong kind of data. So we don't even know what data we're actually working with, especially because it's so distributed. The other one in Gardner, Gardner calls out the IT organization has lost control of digital, because we don't, again, we went through these stages of where we were supposed to digitize things, where we were supposed to have big data, where we were supposed to understand our authoritative sources. And as of today, that might be prevalent in some organizations, especially mission critical types of organizations, probably within defense. But in most mainstream organizations, IT does not have control over its digital processes right now, or its digital environment. So what I'm saying is we transform the enterprise with artificial intelligence. How do we do that? We transform it to think, which is a new paradigm. We right now, I think that there's a lot of influence out there. The shiny new thing, as they would say, that comes on the market. We're always looking at that and thinking, oh, this is the next best thing. And we hear what it is supposed to do, but we don't understand how it is to be inserted into the way we work, nor do we understand the purpose of it within our context. So as we look at this, the enterprises that have attempted to transform themselves only to meet with failure. Right now, 70% of digital transformations are failing, so to speak. I don't necessarily like to use that word, but I would say not successful. So there are four main reasons, and this is back from 2003, that still is very um, it's still visible today. And the reason I do that with the 2003 is because I want us to see how long we've been working on these same things, okay? Strategic or organizational mindset failures. We haven't changed our mindsets in over a decade, okay? Cultural bias and closed-mindedness. We're still operating in a vacuum. Informational breakdowns. We still have that, and leadership mistakes. And for some reason, we don't want to step up and look at these things, so we allow them to continue to fester, and that's why we probably are not seeing success. They lack a paradigm that facilitates perception and learning, and generally have a political bias to continue. Okay, uh, we need to start seeing ways of thinking, learning, and acting, because remember, we're in this digital transformation and we're talking about things being artificial. So when you say things are being artificial, it means that they are actually replicas of the real thing. So just like when we decided to have a word processor, we digitized the components first, and that what came from a typewriter. So it's not that we don't understand the direction that we're headed in. I think that what has happened is we're reinventing the same things, and we're actually a dog chasing its tail, because we don't take the experience of the ones that came before and then engage it into our processes, so the ones coming after can start from the point where we've already established a direction. So the digital organization in the future. And I keep throwing that word out, mindset. I know I've said a lot of times that the three main things that I see right now is mindset, skill set, and tool set. You know, that's what we need in order to be successful. So with adopting this organization mindset, we need to start thinking about how we problem solve, how we create value, and also we need to look at it through a digital first lens, which means, you know, all of those digitization efforts that we were doing, were we really digitizing that which we needed to know? Implementing digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation across the business to drive organization benefits. And I'll get to the definition of those three, because I think a lot of times we miss the point on those three and how they fit in. And this is no different than any other area that we talk to. You know, the point is we want faster decision making. We want, you know, more dynamic performance tracking. We want deeper customer insight. We want more compelling customer experiences, automating manual tasks, innovating new products, services, and business needs, competent workforce. This is what we're saying we need, but how are we relating that back to what we're actually using to plan our strategy? These are actually good objectives or goals. I won't say they're objectives because they're not achievable as they're stated, but they're excellent goals for the organization. But we've got to be able to break it down to a point where we can see it almost to the primitive level of the individuals that create a group and how they work together. Reduce physical and manual processes, much better. We want workflow. Are we thinking, though, how that's impacting the way we're operating? Even when we do physical or manual, like for example, if you can fill out a form in 2 minutes and then you digitize it and it takes you 10 minutes, has somebody measured that time to see that it is now taking an additional 8 minutes to do something digitally rather than just filling it out in hand form? But then along the way, when you look at the total process, it might be that it added 8 minutes to the front, but it cut off a half hour in the back. Okay, so we need to see that total picture. Build real-time digital dashboards. You know, these dashboards need to be visible, you know, especially with artificial intelligence, so that we can see the dynamic activities that are happening. And this also supports, which we'll talk about, like agile management. If you're looking at agile, you know, my philosophy of that is that you want to, you know, fail quick so that you can recover. So when things start going in the wrong direction, you want to see that so that you can jump in immediately and, you know, get ahead of it before it actually happens. I always say we need to be proactive rather than reactive. And I've even asked, like, in organizations with DEI, I ask, how are you being proactive to ensure that you address it before it happens rather than reacting once that has happened, when someone things are not being done equitable, or there are disparities in how things are being done. And it goes back to the data. Plan a digital transformation roadmap. Roadmaps are wonderful. We need roadmaps, but we also need to be realistic with roadmaps. I did a speech with a group at the VA, and that was one of their biggest complaints, was these knowledge maps are so convoluted and complex that they look like spaghetti straps, and we don't understand them. And I said, well, what are you saying when you see them? A lot of times people see complexity and they go, oh, this is great, this is wonderful. And instead of saying this is too complex, I can't understand it, can we develop it in a different means? So we need those roadmaps, but we need roadmaps that are understood and understandable. So let's talk about digitization and digitalization and digital transformation. Oh, by the way, if anybody wants to interrupt me, please do. I see something coming in the chat right now. The digital hairball. Yes. So please, in the chat, I'll try to watch it. Or Art, could you watch the chat and let me know if someone's got their hand up or anything like that?
Sure, I forgot to mention that at the beginning, but yeah, we're always interactive and open, so feel free to chime in, anybody. Thank you.
Okay. So these terms which we're passing around, each has their place. Remember, digitization is putting something in a digital format or code so that it can be used, okay? Digitalization is then converting that physical thing into a digital format, again, where it's represented. A typewriter is physical. How do I digitize it so that then I can have a digital typewriter, which I call a word processor? Even though the name has changed, it is the same and it has the same function. Now, what's also happened is there's been some additional processing added to it because of the digital nature of it. We can integrate it with other things now. But the whole point is, when you look at that typewriter, an old typewriter still works the same as it did when it was in the word processor. All of those capabilities are there and then some, okay? So you got digitization, which is I digitize my components, or I digitize what I need to see, or I digitize the elements, information around the data that I need to capture to do analysis on. Digitalization is when I start doing those key performance indicators that then give me a higher view of what I have digitized. And then digital transformation, which is both of those. But we have to understand that digital transformation also comes in three views. It comes in a product, it also comes in a process, and it also comes in insights and analytics. So as you'll see, we see technology fits into our structure. So if I insert technology into my business process, then I want to see how it begins to work. For example, if I decide to use an autonomous car, then I need to know that that's being placed in a process where either I am trying to get a better control of the paths that I follow, or I am trying to replace the driver. Either way, you need to have purpose, and it needs to have intent of what that artificial intelligence is doing, and you need to actually give it a name rather than calling it artificial intelligence. Because even I look at generative AI right now, and when you start doing branding and you get Chat GPT, and it's wonderful because it has a wider bandwidth, but it also has to have some structured areas, some semi-structured, and then some unstructured areas. And we look back and we see Siri and Alexa, which are also generative AI, but they have very boundaries that they work within, and so therefore they have given them names, and that helps us to understand the purpose of them and how they work. So digitalization has to happen before digitalization, and both have to happen before you can do digital transformation. Oh, it's not moving forward. Why does this always stick for me? Give me 1 second. Okay. So what do we want to make certain that I didn't hit? Yeah. Sorry about that. I am so sorry. It seemed like it was jumping around and I had to make certain. Thank you for your patience. I'm back. So, what do we need to do? Again, we need to automate the think part of strategy because that's where we extract from the old and we pull into the plan. And then, if we have that in a digital format, we can manage it better because remember, computers can do things faster than us, and we can also have representation of components that we need to have in place in order to be able to perform our jobs quicker and faster. So the strategy formulation automation part is, if you look at this, where we have lots of data that is in our environment. So we're scanning that data in, and how we bring that data in again is digitization. But then we have strategic formulation, and that's where we pull data together so that we can determine where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, where opportunities are, and also where threats are. We look at those things to see what are our high leverage areas and what are our low leverage areas, and what we need to move forward into our strategy for implementation throughout the organization. So here we leverage the data in the strategic formulation, and we know what's out there. Currently, there's a disconnect between those two. As we've said earlier, a lot of times we're making strategy decisions basically on guess and gosh or based on experience of previous activities that we've done, but we don't necessarily have evidence to support that they were actually successful. So here's where I want to change the narrative. The current narrative is we always say data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, okay? But yet we talk about other things. And what we haven't included in there is intelligence. Now, wisdom is a human point that we take into consideration. And wisdom is good to know because it helps you to understand, the difference in things. But cognition is awareness. And in an organization, we've always strived to have awareness. We want to be aware of the things that are happening so that we can drive better decision making. So the blue areas are what I'm adding. I said, let's start out with the data because we have to collect the data. We must digitize the data. Information allows us to then group the data and bring it into objects so that we can also align it with functions within the organization or our business units. But we have intelligence here where we can pull information based on that information. We can do certain algorithms and we can do certain matchings and relationships to see if there's any correlations between the data, if there's any similarities, if there are any trends. And that's what we get in intelligence. And intelligence actually brings us proactive knowledge. So then we can choose between those based on our review of it to make certain that, it is a direction to follow in. And once we have that knowledge, we become aware that this is what has happened when we have done these particular types of interventions, and we can reuse them. So this is the new narrative that I'm changing that pyramid to. And notice it's not in a pyramid form because all of them kind of work together. And I wasn't certain that the pyramid was you reach wisdom and you're at the top of it. You can reach all of the areas and be equally, they can support equal functions or purposes that you're looking toward. This just gives you a different view of it. It takes off on the DIKC model. So this one adds in the intelligence in it. So it's DI, data, information, intelligence, knowledge, and cognition. As you look, the hindsight is exploitation. Let's look behind us and see how we can exploit what we already know. But then let's look ahead of us and see how we can explore to make certain that things are done better in the future. This is it's a little busy, but it takes you through each of those steps as well. And as you notice, it starts with the organization, operations, and then performance. The organization is usually organization development because we have different structures. We develop our organizations in different ways. We have different hierarchical charts. we have to include those because, again, you want to start from the primitive level and be able to roll up. That's where you get your deep learning because I want to be able to see if, especially if I have a matrix organization, I want to see if my engineers are all competent. And if not, I want to see which ones are doing really well and then figure out why they're doing better than the others so that we can leverage that. Strategy is also part of the organization because our strategy is actually should be aligned with our organization because we should know which areas we're actually having to improve. You don't go in and just improve the whole. You try to go down to the specific area of need, and then you build your interventions and you build them based on, again, your timeline of getting things done and based on the priority of what needs to be done based on threats to the organization. Um, then we get to this point where we have this organization, we have this kind of strategy. We need to represent that. And that's where we're doing that digitalization. We need to represent it in a digital twin. We've proven this. Apollo 13 was one of the best digital twins out there. That's why they were able to bring back the astronaut in the moment of time that it was because they had every piece of that particular operation of Apollo 13 digitized and down to the point where they could have those algorithms in order to determine success. Then we look at, and here's where we come, because remember, we're thinking things. So I'm trying to equate it to human. We got that digital mind. And here's where those value points come in at. I don't want to go after everything. I don't need to go after everything in operations, but you know what? I need to know things about customer, competitors, and I kind of changed competitors to marketplace. I need to know things about my employees, my info, and here's a new one that I added in information because in my research, I found that in most cases, people spend an average of 20% of their time looking for information to complete their work, and 99% of the time they don't find it. That's a lot of waste just for not having information that you need in order to execute tasks. Partners, I need to know about partners. I need to know about my process and procedures, which is a hindrance as well because even in some organizations, they have not updated their processes in years. So really they're working off of the practices of their people. And you need to, I know we've done like Six Sigma and we've done different things to get those practices under control. But again, those are things that need to be in place if we're going to have visibility into how to improve products and services and then technology. When we move over to the performance improvement, that's where we take that information and we start building our neural networks that have all of these interactions and these synapses. Did someone put up anything? And synapses of how things relate to each other. And you also have, again, and I want to make certain, and I said with artificial intelligence, you don't always have insight. You do have products that include it, and some are structured where you know the results of it, okay? And then you also have you have them in products, you have them in processes, RPA, and you also have insights. So you have to determine where these fit into your map, your strategic map. And then you got knowledge management, because then once we get to knowledge management, we want to manage that. This is where we capture what we know. If we don't capture it, again, it's capital, which means it's volatile and it'll disappear. So let's make that a little easier. With strategic formulation, let's look at a new business model. The as is from the past. We got the data, the information, the process and procedures, and we've added value sources, intelligence, and knowledge, okay? And then from the top down, we have vision, mission, goals, and objectives, which need to connect. The sweet spot is when you have knowledge-driven objectives aligned with intangible asset performance measures, especially because intangible assets now represent 90% of the performance of an organization. So if our objectives are driven against those intangible assets, then we probably will be able to see performance improvement within organizations, and not only see it, we'll be able to justify it. Because I'm not certain, and this might be just me, but I have not seen faster, better, cheaper, which is what we have been touting since KM came on the market. Okay. We need to build a doppelganger, and I'm in the doppelganger, the duplicate of a living person. We need to develop the duplicate of human intelligence within the organization. And how does the enterprise emulate human thought? We build a holistic enterprise cognition system. And this is not, even if it looks simple, this is very complex and requires expertise. It requires the right set of people and the right group together to make certain that we have our pieces, all the components that we need. I won't go through all of these, but this just says all the value sources and context. And again, what you're looking at is different associations, positions, and then you're looking at the impacts of these against impacts and benefits of these within your organization and your performance. Now, when you know those, and this starts a taxonomy to say you can, and again, I want to be specific too with this. This is a taxonomy. You can change the names to accommodate the industry because once you think about it, they actually all do apply. Like for example, if I'm in the education industry, who is my customer? Student. Okay, so therefore you can actually equate those, but we have to have a common language if we're going to be able to play on the same field with how intangibles are valued. In each of those areas, the first thing you need to do is identify the intangible assets that you need to know. And these are not written in stone, but the ones that I have within these groupings actually came from intangible asset valuation models, mainly the Kaplan and Norton, the balanced scorecard. So these were just ones that were pulled out of there. So again, this is just to show how you can actually build your intangibles by knowing what it is you need to see. And I'll go through a couple of these kind of quickly, which is customer acquisition. I want to know how I'm acquiring my customers. I want to know my customers, how satisfied my customers are. Longevity. I want to know those customers that have been with me the longest and why. And then even profitability. I want to know who are the customers that are bringing in the most into my organization. And you can, some of these models are already developed that you can leverage, and some of them may have to be created because we haven't been capturing them in the past. So, following with Peter Drucker, one of the things that he's always stated is that the diagnostic information that you would need things like foundation information, which is just cash flow and liquidity projections. You need productivity information, competence information, and resource allocation information. And when you look back at those particular areas, you'll see that these all fit into those areas, and we can begin to identify how we capture measures that give us this type of information. We also need to bring in the experts, econometrics. We need people, econometrics, to do the algorithms, to help with the formulas, to identify what the formulas are, the elements, and everything that comes in that. I am not an economist, so I know that this is not an area that I should be working in. So I would have experts come in to look at this and help develop those algorithms, as well as data scientists. That's what I mean by we need the right team of people who are working together to be able to actually develop and test to the standards that we need them developed. Once we have that identified, this is where you get your network, and this is where you get your deep learning. You cross-pollinate those views, and you can actually, in some cases, you have structured where you know what the outcome's going to be, but in some cases, you can just do discovery, and you never know what you will find in discovery. It might be that, employee is actually impacting another partner in a certain way, or you might find out that something that you never thought about, that there's a correlation between it. So we look at relationship intelligence, and you see how you cross-pollinate. You got employee to employee, employee influences or impacts on other employees. That if you have visibility into that, and again, this is not with knowledge management to reprimand anyone, it's to give you knowledge so that you can improve a situation. Because sometimes things are happening and we just need to get in and correct them. And that also helps with our current dynamics in our environment of the behavioral issues that we're having. We've seen, like even in reporting relationships, that a person can report to one person and can be a stellar employee and develop excellent work. But then when they're moved to another person, and whatever the reason, they all of a sudden become degraded and they don't produce as well. And those are things that you need to see, the reporting relationships that work. Almost like with teachers, when they began to look at how they actually impact student success. You know, some teachers can work with some students and some can't work with some students. So we need to either teach them how to work with those students, or we need to find a method that you put them with the ones that they work best with. So this is the cross-pollination in order to build the network that you would need to have visibility into the organization. This just shows you with the neural network, it breaks it down, makes it a little simple. It shows you that we have relationship intelligence, competence intelligence, and structure intelligence. And again, this is based on the areas that most of the CEOs say that they need to know about within their organization. So if we get them the information they need to know and we build the network and the formulas, it should be able to build them an intelligence model that they can use in strategic, tactical, and operational models. This is just a show tell of that. Again, coming from the data sources, and some of these data sources exist, some may not. So there might have to be some places that we have to actually add data in or create, new process or activities to capture that data. But as you see, you would have customer and student, recruit, retention, experience, safety, and then on the other side you have technology, which are apps, website, artificial intelligence, database. So you know what? I might be able to improve my customer retention by using some type of AI interface within there. Or I might be able to improve my student, and I have students there, my students' experience by having an AI interface also married up. And we may find too that safety, we have put in an artificial intelligence, and all of a sudden safety on a campus goes improves for students. So there are a lot of different ways of looking at this, but the one thing is you got to make it real. You can't just call it artificial intelligence and you can't just call it measurement. You have got to give them specific names when you get to the instance. We have metadata and then we have actual data. The metadata is that which defines itself, so it is being used in that manner, but it needs to be interpreted so that it fits within the industry or within the specific area that it's being used in. So when we align the objectives and goals, remember that's that sweet spot. Again, actionable data to knowledge. When we have that and we can build our objectives off of it, we now have evidence-based information that tells us what's going on, and we can have objectives that are realistic and obtainable. This has to be cascaded throughout organizational units. That's why it's deep learning. We can't just stop at the top. You've got to be able to build this network, and that means the complexity of it is going to be huge. And if we're trying to, again, we're trying to emulate man. So if you sit back and you think about it, the colloidal effects that happen within man, there are millions of them that are within us. I don't know that there will be millions within an organization, but we need to know that we have the capacity to handle this now, but we just need to have the proper resources to put it in place. Okay, cognitive, and I don't want to run out of time. The cognitive enterprise system, and I'm taking you back again to us making it human. So we have the body, mind, and brain. The body is the operations, which is the value functions and systems that go within an organization. When you have mind, you're talking the intelligence, which is that neural network that taps into all of the areas that we have. And then we have that augmented intelligence, which is the strategy, and that is the brain. And that is why it's the brainchild of the C execs, because they need to have visibility into that so they can lay out a strategy that can be propagated or cascaded down through the organization. This is just a different view, but most important here is it shows you those particular areas that are important: data management, information applications, process management. You got business intelligence, knowledge management, organizational learning, change management, and performance measurement, which is actually the framework that you go up to develop the cognitive enterprise system. And also, while you're doing that, you need to think about the culture, DEI, and other things that need to be included in there that will help protect your system from biases and inequities. Human, again, just making certain that you understand that we can't just do one system, they're all integrated. Because remember, we are looking at making the computer or making our systems more human-like because we're trying to emulate the things that we do. So if we do that, we want to operate, and this is kind of, it might take you to a different, but when you go to a doctor, they look at your vitals, and when they look at your vitals, then they can drill down into your systems to see where something might have gone wrong. When we look at the organization, our vitals are those value sources that they need to know. And when we look at those systems, again, we got to keep this clean. We got to keep things going. So data is our nutrient. Control helps us eliminate things. You know, we got to communicate. Again, security is our protection. We got to test and validate and verify or defend our stuff. We got to monitor to control it. We also have to, with records management, which is regulated, we got to be able to know whether to archive it or whether to dispose of it. Quality assurance, we want to make certain that we have good quality. If we're reproducing and we're doing innovation, if we're transporting we're doing metrics, you know, we're capturing and we're keeping it alive with that. And then support, we got technology, and all of those things work together. So we need to see how we tie those together to have a complete system. When the thinking enterprise, I won't read through all of these, but this just tells you what happens. The thing is, you mimic cognition. You have a symbolic representation of what you're working with, and again, use real names. Identify the functions, define the relationships, and again, imitate colloidal properties. The way it works in our system, again, an artificial prosthetic is artificial. And when they give someone a new arm, they don't just give them an arm that's non-functional. They give them one that emulates the movements of our arms. So therefore, they have to look at the colloidal effects of what's happening so that they could mimic them. Okay, so that the person can actually use the hand almost like as a real hand. Okay. Visualize the outcomes with the dashboard. And this is just something that was put together. These are not true values. It's just to show you can then see where you stand. You know, with my customers, I'm at a 7.8. Okay, that's yellow because perhaps you want 80%, which is good. You know, with my process, I'm working at an 8%, so I might not focus on that. But then I look in my technology and I'm like 2%. I need to find out why technology is not helping with the performance of the organization. You can read the conclusions, but bring together diverse components, identify sources of value, align intelligence with the value chain, formulate a model, develop hypotheses, and then verify the findings. Remember risk and readiness as well. You got to ask the right questions. What are the algorithms? Why are they necessary? Who is responsible for their creation? When are they used? Where do they fit into AI? And how do they relate to machine learning? Remember, the foundation is data, and as we said, the purpose, authenticity, integrity, and completeness is critical, because if that is not good, then you could have a catastrophic path. Things need to be intentional. So when you identify and use algorithms, they must be intentionally planned so that you have a clear picture of what they are intended to do. In order to do this, we need to change both behavior and mindset. Employees and the enterprise and leadership, we need to come together and recognize that, you know, we need a different mindset of how we problem solve and how we have a digital lens and how we work with that digital lens. So we have, what I'm showing is a way of managing work, paying due attention to the value and effect of an intangible asset, namely knowledge. And this is always one of my favorite ones to end with. We need to change our way of thinking to achieve success. And with Albert Einstein, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And then also with Peter Drucker, knowledge has to be improved, challenged, and increased constantly, or it vanishes. Again, knowledge also has to be, like you said, captured and improved. And if you're looking at capital right now, capital is very volatile. We need to be able to work with explicit knowledge. And I thank you.
Hooray! Well, that's not going to let you get off that easily, Annie. We have some time for questions or insights from
Yeah, I'm
audience
about to stop
members. So
sharing and come
please,
back.
all right, please chime in. Everyone. What are your thoughts or comments? Go ahead and chime in. Anybody, please.
This is Glenda. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Glenda. Yes, great.
All right. This is awesome. Every time I sign on, I get more and more excited about this information being passed. But I want to ask Dr. Green if you would go in a little bit more detail about building, and I hope I'm going to say this word correctly, the doppelganger.
Yeah, a doppelganger is just recreating a human being or aspect of a human being. So when we are trying to, when you're doing strategy, you want to be able to think and have what you need in order to develop that strategy. So the doppelganger is actually building the mind into the organization. So we are building a mind into a building, a structure, and you have to go through certain steps. And so the key is in the body. The mind is actually the nervous system, which is the neural system. Okay, so that's where neural networks come from. So we need to build a neural network within the organization that mimics that, which is you have all of these, and I call them cross pollinations. So you have all of these connections to things so that it can give you feedback on how you're doing.
All right. Thank you for that. Pretty awesome.
Mhm.
I have
Candace, yeah, go ahead, please.
some comments and then just sort of some interesting things. So in the last few days, I've had a few discussions with people, some in South Africa and some sort of locally where I am in Germany. And I think it's interesting, KM seems to be in very different places and at very different stages. So obviously, if you look at what you're talking about, like the digitalization and all of that, I think it's quite interesting in terms of seeing how people are still battling with where people fits in, where the systems fit in, and also how much collaboration is going to happen. So I think your presentation is great in just sort of really basing some of that in the holistic picture. So you mentioned IT was no longer the gatekeeper to technology resources. And I think a lot of people are feeling that sort of gap maybe. And that was quite interesting in terms of some of the discussions. And also found your relationship analysis quite interesting, the way of looking at how cross-pollination to create visibility in the organization. So not so much a question, but just those were some of the highlights for me that really sort of stood out in terms of how you presented that whole picture and sort of an understanding from definitely a leadership perspective, but also just sort of coming at it and saying, I can see where this is and kind of start to build strategies or understand how to align with the strategy of an organization. So thanks, Annie, I really enjoyed that presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions? I've got just a quick one, Annie. It's just fantastic presentation overall about the transformation that's needed enterprise. And I like the whole idea of the holistic enterprise cognitive system. So you've talked about, the physical, the structural, and then that even brings in the mental and the cognitive. One element, though, I wanted to ask you about, get your thoughts on in terms of planning strategy. there's the temporal element. And I know we've kind of been locked into this legacy artifact of the strategic plan, and that's done annually or maybe every 2 years or so. With this fast changing complexity that we're faced with, both the external environment is complex and fast changing. We as an internal organization are increasing in complexity, and we need to change. What are your thoughts on that artifact called the annual strategic plan? Should it be more of a living type of thing, or is the 365-day cycles? What are your thoughts on what that cycle should be and how we should maybe adjust that that artifact in itself?
Absolutely, because if your organization is well oiled, so to speak, and you have the pieces in place that are working together, it should be dynamic. It has to be dynamic now because things are moving much quicker. We no longer, you can plan out 1, 3, 5 years, but you're also going to have to, as you're doing that, monitor the changes that are occurring. That's why change management is very important. And you never know. You can put something in place and it seems to fit the bill, but then 4 months later, it doesn't. And so with change management and agile methodologies, you've got to be able to handle that when it occurs, and what you want to see is if it does just drop out the bottom, then something went wrong really quick that should have been noticed. But you want to see a gradual drive toward where that error is going to happen. So yes, you should be monitoring it daily. And it's almost like too with some of the tools with security, within organizations and especially with data, you want security, you want to understand where your highly sensitive data is being used at. So you need to monitor that on a regular basis so that you can protect the privacy and confidentiality of individuals. And that's the same thing I think with strategy. If you're going to protect your organization and its growth, then you're going to have to set up so that you're monitoring that on a consistent basis rather than putting a plan together, executing, and then saying a year later, we went wrong, let's change this. Okay. It's just not working anymore. We need to get rid of the old models and we need to bring in the new models because we're in a digital era.
Absolutely true. And a lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving
Great.
parts. And we really need to rethink how we're running our organizations again, because I have not seen, and someone please show me, I have not seen where we're faster, better, cheaper yet. I have not seen that. Even with ebooks, why are electronic books costing the same as hardbound books?
Good question.
I need to see that.
Yeah.
Profit motive.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that. Yes, Steve, you got a comment?
I just said profit motive. People don't necessarily lower the price for something that's more efficient. Ebooks, they want to make money on ebooks just like they do on paper books. And so there's really no incentive to lower the price. In fact, there's every incentive to raise the price because they say, well, it's more convenient, so it's worth more money than a paper book.
Yeah, I had a quick question for you, Annie. KM, I think, has stalled because we have definitions and models that are pretty old. And, we've always heard for a long time that KM is about getting information to people at the right time to make a decision, which is sort of a static operation that you're making a decision within. And you were starting off by describing it as to gain knowledge. And I think that's a much more dynamic way of expressing it. And even if it is to make a decision, you would gain some knowledge from that, either from affirmation that that process still works or that it now doesn't, and you're going to learn from that. So the overarching definition of gaining knowledge, I think, is a better starting place for KM in general. Are you finding that definition resonating with people in KM, or do you think that this is a topic that that should be brought up at some point at a conference or something where people are starting to change their view on the overall definition?
Yeah, I think it's a topic that needs to be brought up. I think, like what Candace said earlier, it's interesting to see how so many people are going in so many different directions with KM. And I saw that happening a while ago because we call it all KM. And even when I spoke with some people, they would say, "Oh, I do communities of practice." And I'm like, and that's all they thought KM was. Okay. So I really think that we need to engage in more conversations as to the integration of it within a digital environment, and how we get knowledge. And like you said, and gain knowledge. And we also need to think about, again, mindsets and the fact that most people think that knowledge means that when you make a decision, you must do something. But knowledge means that it gives you insight. So to make a decision to not do anything is still a decision, and they need to recognize that that's okay. You don't have to change anything just for the sake of saying I did knowledge management, you know? And I think that poses a problem too. And like you said, the old models, I think everyone's still trying to force that little triangle where you get to wisdom. And I'm seeing that resurface in organizations. I went to a presentation and somebody brought that up, and I'm sitting there looking at it and I'm going, what does that mean? We also have intelligence now. Where is intelligence fitting into this? AI is critical if we insert it properly, but we're not thinking of how, because AI will give us proactive knowledge. The other thing is, I think that we need to focus on explicit knowledge more, and even implicit knowledge, because a lot of times I see in knowledge management, everybody's focusing on intellectual capital and everybody's focusing on tacit knowledge, what people know. And I mean, that's good. But again, it's volatile. People move around. People go different places. People don't update themselves with the information they need all the time. And we're always gaining information. So, whereas what we capture within our structures is of more evidence, because it is temporal and substance based. I hope that made sense.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any last thoughts before we break? Well, thank you. Thank you. Let's have a round of applause for Annie again one more time.
Thank you.
Right now, Annie talked about the importance of, yeah, right. And you've talked about the importance of changing behavior and mindset. If you're going to make this incredible transformation, that's what's needed. And that actually points to a new paradigm. So that leads us into our third style of leadership, meaning change and innovation leadership. And that's the topic of next week's session by Dr. John Lewis, who you just heard from. So he will be talking about that and giving us his model for change. And so you definitely do not want to miss that. Anything you want to say as introduction to that, John?
Well, I do think that Annie really set this up well, talking about gaining knowledge, talking about thinking and as a base structure, so that we can all participate in that and join AI in that as well. So I think that that's a great setup for what I'll be talking about. And as a hint, that thinking structure happens to mimic story structure, which is what we're wired for.
Absolutely.
And don't dare call it storytelling. It's story structure. It's different.
Yeah.
Which you'll find out. So
that's right.
So you'll have to tune.
That's right. Thanks.
You have to tune in. Yeah, you have to tune in next week then. Same time, this same place. If you're registered, I think you've already got the link. So look forward to seeing you. And please spread the word, everyone. All right. With that,
And
we'll
we
say
will have these
thank you
on
again.
YouTube.
And,
If I'm sorry. All right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Annie.
Okay. We will have these on YouTube as well. So when we send them out, please feel free to share them with who you think would like to hear them. Okay.
Right.
Okay, and everybody's making their comments in the chat. Excellent presentation. So all the accolades are coming in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you all. And great seeing you all again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Till next week.
Next week.